Hey everyone, and welcome to this edition of the Politically Incorrect Podcast. I'm Jim Williams. You just saw Tal Heinrich, who is going to give us the daily briefing in just a couple of minutes. Here's what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to talk about the UN and their what they passed today in the way of a resolution. It got 13-0 votes. The United States did not veto it. And it's going to talk. We're going to talk about what's in it, what it means, what it doesn't mean, and give you a deep dive and kind of analyze it so you know exactly where it is and why, what concessions were made as to why the United States, who abstained, they didn't vote for it, they didn't vote against it, what language they accepted so that they would not veto it. Okay, so there's reasons behind all this, and we'll get that. We also had an opportunity yesterday to be with about between 10 and 12 journalists who had an opportunity to meet with a high-ranking member of the Israeli government who gave us a briefing, and we were allowed to ask questions. And so we'll give you some information coming from that high-ranking official who gave us an interview on background. For those of you who don't know what that means, that simply means that they were there to give us information, and we were. There's an embargo on using the video of that person as well as using that person's name. They are a high-ranking official in the Israeli government, and so we'll just leave it at that. Okay, so we'll be talking about that, and we'll be talking about what's going on with the UN. But first, as we always do, let's start with, in this case, Tal Heinrich, and she's going to give us the daily briefing, after which we'll talk about what's going on, and she answers the questions, so you're going to get it totally unedited, and let's go to Tal.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Tal Heinrich, a spokesperson for the Israeli Prime Minister's office. This is day 77 of the October 7th war. Let us begin with some of our latest figures. We continue to mourn the loss of over 1,200 Israeli citizens who were murdered on Hamas's October 7th killing spree. Our thoughts are with the victims' families. This morning, the IDF announced the deaths of 2 more soldiers, thus bringing the IDF's death toll to 471. The fallen soldiers are 21-year-old Lieutenant Shai Ayeli from Ashkelon and 31-year-old Sergeant First Class Tal Shua from Beersheba. Our thoughts are with Shai and Tal's families, and we mourn their tragedies with heavy hearts. Our hostage count has not changed since yesterday as we continue to pursue the release of 129 men, women, and children who were abducted and currently remain in the hands of terrorists in Gaza. The Red Cross continues to shirk responsibility for taking care of our hostages, and we again demand that they do their job and visit our hostages to provide them with vital medical care. And now for an operational update. In Khan Yunis, the IDF's 214th Artillery Brigade and the Commando Brigade are using guided weapons such as the Iron Sting and other precision missiles in their operations. So far, they have struck hundreds of terror targets with those accurate, precise weapons. In southern Gaza City, IDF troops located numerous weapons, shells, and explosive devices in a residence adjacent to a kindergarten. In a haunting discovery this morning in Bet Hanun, the IDF uncovered a set of Hamas uniforms meant for children. This is yet another reminder of Hamas's absolute evil as a group who brainwashes their youth to hate Jews, glorify martyrs, and dream about obliterating the Jewish state. They lie to their own children, insisting that peace is impossible while Jews live in Israel. Where is UNICEF? Why is there so little concern about the Hamas terror group robbing children of their future? On the northern front, the IDF continues to launch targeted responses to Hezbollah's unyielding aggression. We condemn the blatant disregard for UN Resolution 1701, which guaranteed Hezbollah would be disarmed in southern Lebanon, and we express our outrage at countries who remain silent and refuse to condemn Hezbollah's repeated escalations. We also highlight the UN's one-sidedness when it comes to Israel's conflict with Hezbollah. Just yesterday, the UN tweeted about 60,000 displaced Lebanese civilians without ever mentioning the more than 80,000 Israeli civilians who have been displaced for over 2 months now. The double standard is clear. The UN's impartiality is a myth. We are well aware of the upcoming UN Security Council vote regarding our war against Hamas terrorists. We remind the international community that Hamas dragged us into this war, and they have explicitly threatened to commit more and more massacres on the same scale and with the same brutality as October 7th. To those calls for genocide, we say never again. We are acting with the dignity of a government which is determined to care for its own people. The same cannot be said of Hamas, who used their entire population as a massive human shield. Any country which is concerned about the welfare of Palestinians and Israelis must insist on Hamas's complete surrender and unconditional release of hostages. Only then can we hope to see a lasting peace. I'm now glad to take your questions. Please.
Comes from Reuters. It is a series of questions, and I will ask them all together. Mm-hmm. When will the humanitarian corridor between Cyprus and Gaza be active? Which countries and shipping companies will transport the aid to Gaza? How and where will it be landed on the Gaza coast? And Israel has kept Gaza under naval blockade since 2007 and is legally required to exclude any and all ships from Gaza waters. How then can aid ships be admitted as part of this corridor?
Well, Israel is already going above and beyond. We're really taking unprecedented steps here to ease the civilian suffering in Gaza. From the very outset of this war, we said that there's no limit on food and water supplies entering the Gaza Strip. And we continue to examine different ways, to continue the free passage of food and water into Gaza. We don't want to see the Palestinian civilians suffering for the war that Hamas has dragged us into. And once we have new official announcements to make, well, we will make sure that you're aware, and we will announce it in that respect. Next question.
The next question comes from Jim Williams of Zenger International News Service in Washington, D.C. Mm-hmm. Tal, while the UN has been critical of the amount of humanitarian aid going to Gaza from Israel, yesterday, President Herzog said 3 times as much aid could go to Gaza if the UN would dedicate more help to distribute the aid. My question is the UN doing enough to get aid to Gaza, or are they covering up for their own lack of ability to allow Israel to provide the aid to the people in Gaza?
You see, we have said that we have excess capacity to inspect the trucks getting into the Gaza Strip. And we're talking about hundreds of trucks. We have 2 inspection points. We have Kerem Shalom and Nitzana, which are 2 border crossings between Israel and the Gaza Strip. And we have the Rafah border crossing and Kerem Shalom, from which the aid is actually getting inside the Gaza Strip. Now, we have to ask, why is the aid not being distributed appropriately, right? Why are Hamas stealing some of the aid that is meant for the civilian population in Gaza? And in that respect, I think it's important to mention that it's outrageous that UN agencies and some aid groups have not condemned this method, that Hamas not even acknowledge it. We, the IDF, are releasing these videos for the world to see. It is very clear that Hamas is stealing some of this aid. So I'll repeat again, we are able to inspect more trucks than what is getting inside the Gaza Strip. International organizations, aid agencies, they should keep up with our pace, not the other way around.
The next question is from Lauren Izzo of CNN. Can you give any insight into Israel's knowledge of Sinwar's current whereabouts and how close the IDF could be to closing in on him?
So, Lauren from CNN, we are not commenting on operational military activity happening right now on the ground or anything that has to do with military strategy moving ahead. But what I can say is that Yahya Sinwar, the leader of Hamas, has signed his own death sentence on October 7th, and we will administer justice.
The next question is from Melanie Lidman of the Associated Press. Can you please comment on reports that IDF have destroyed ambulances from the Palestinian Red Crescent in Jabalia? And can you comment on the New York Times investigation that Israel has dropped at least 2,000-pound bunker buster bombs on Gaza? Thank you.
Well, I think we will have to refer these questions to the IDF. I haven't seen these two reports. These are a question for the IDF spokesperson. That's it? All right. So these are all the questions that we have for today. That concludes our daily briefing. Thank you for being with us.
Okay. Tal's briefing is over, and she covered a lot of ground there. Let's begin with breaking down, as I said, the UN resolution. Now, how did it come about? As we know, when we'll be reporting that for over a week now, what's going on is the UN has looked at a number of different potential resolutions that they were going to put forward. Remember that the United States has vetoed all of the resolutions against Israel, resolutions that would handcuff Israel in what they want to do. Okay, so at the end of the day, the United States has been playing, the traffic cop, if you will, in this regard, in making certain that no resolution is unfairly brought forth with regards to how to treat Israel or how Israel runs the war. Okay, so that has been the way that things have gone. In the last 24 hours, there's been some heavy-duty negotiations going on with Secretary of State Blinken, as well as obviously the ambassadors is involved, which would be the UAE, Qatar, Egypt, and the United States, on what best to do in the region with regard to, is there anything that could pass in the UN that would be acceptable to the United States. Late last evening, there was some drafts of resolutions that came around, and eventually there was one that the United States decided was fair, and we'll delve into the rationale behind that in a second. So it was 13-0. The United States did not vote for it. They didn't vote against it. They voted to abstain. Okay, so basically that's what that is. It's not a yes vote. It's not a no vote. So they got to an abstain situation on that. Now let's talk about the resolution. The UAE, who is the only Arab country on the current 15-member council, called on the warring parties in Gaza to allow the use of all available routes into Gaza for aid deliveries. And that's according to what we said was the draft that was the draft that the United States would sign on to. Okay, now here's some more of that. What it does, it also demands the immediate release of all hostages abducted during the Hamas attack on Israel on October 7th. That was a crucial point for the U.S. to sign off on this. Okay, they wanted that if there's going to be humanitarian aid brought into Gaza, the condition of it would have to be that all hostages that came under attack and were, taken into captivity in Gaza on October 7th had to be released immediately. Okay, that was another part of it. The resolution, which, as we said, the Secretary General is now appointing a coordinator for facilitating the coordination, monitoring, and verifying that all, aid cargo enter Gaza in humanitarian hands. Now, what does that mean? As you heard in Tal's briefing, that some of the aid that has been going into Gaza through the two border crossings has been stolen from the United Nations warehouses by Hamas, okay, and has been kept from the Palestinian people who need it. Hamas, has taken everything, from flour to water, everything they need to keep their troops going, and they've stolen it from the UN warehouses. Now, it's fair to ask, and this has been acknowledged by the UN. Okay, the United Nations has acknowledged that they have been ripped off by Hamas. The question you have to ask is, all right, you have a warehouse, it's stockpiled with food and medical supplies and everything and anything that is necessary to keep the people in Gaza, the Palestinians in Gaza, alive and kept in a humanitarian way. Why would you not have a UN security force guarding that installation? I mean, you got to know that, it's not a warehouse you can just lock up and say, see you in the morning. I mean, this should be a 24/7 run operation. Shouldn't be, run in that regard. So, as I said, we spoke to a high-ranking member of the Israeli government yesterday, and that person told us without question that the 200 trucks that are going in there through the two different border crossings, that could be doubled, even tripled. So as many as 600 trucks could go through in a day. The problem is, on the backside, the United Nations, the people who are helping them in the aggregation and distribution of this humanitarian aid, are just not getting getting it fast enough and putting it away fast enough. So clearly they don't have the manpower to take the aid that they keep telling you that Israel is not providing to them. Okay, is it enough? Probably not. But again, if you're not, you can't necessarily argue that Israel's not attempting to make this humanitarian aid available if you're not clearing that aid as fast as you possibly can. And if you see that you're not getting there, if you're not getting these trucks, unloaded and the food and necessities to the people who need them in Gaza, then you need more people. So not only do you need more people, you need security to make certain that this is going to where it needs to be. And as I said, just as importantly, you need more folks there to make certain that these places can stay open 24/7, so that the fastest you get that aid in, that you start to divvy it out and taking it to the people who absolutely have to have it. Okay, so that is something that right now there's a dispute over. It's you have on one side the Israeli government saying we're happy to get as much in there. We've never stopped, you know, attempting to get that humanitarian aid in, and but it's being there's a bottleneck on the UN side in making sure that the aid that they're asking for can get to the people who need it in a timely manner. Okay, so here's the next step, which is very important. The U.S. made certain that there was no pause or stopping of the fighting for the moment. Okay, so that was something that they said, look, uh, we're not going to push for any hostage release programming and any of that um, because Hamas asked for a total stop of fighting in Gaza. Then they would discuss the hostage release program and how many hostages would be done. Israel said, wait a minute, no, we're not going to stop that. We would like to go back to what happened prior to December 1st when Hamas broke the deal that the United States, Qatar, and the folks in Israel had negotiated, which was prisoners for prisoners and a humanitarian pause in the fighting. Israel would like to have gone back to that. Hamas broke it on December the 1st, okay, when they fired rockets into Israel. So they broke the deal, and now the deal that they want is stop everything with regard to fighting, and then we'll start negotiating with you about hostages for hostages. That is not that's a non-starter for Israel. The United States made certain that no wording in that in that resolution had anything to do with the stopping of fighting until there is any release of the hostages. And in the case of the new resolution, which we said earlier, said specifically all hostages must be released. Okay. Then the humanitarian aid. All right. So, as I said before, I spoke along with a small group of journalists to high-ranking member of the Israeli government, and it's on background. I explained that to you. And here's some of the highlights of what we said. Now, specifically, it was said that Israel that they could triple the number of aid trucks, and of the aid trucks that if the people on the aid side from the UN could get it to the folks in Gaza as quickly as possible, as I said, and not keep it from Hamas's hands. They haven't been able to do that at this point in time, but Israel continues to push as much aid in there. Now, we were also explained about what's going on. You heard in Tal's briefing a question, I believe, from a colleague at Associated Press about the details on aid coming to Gaza by ships from Cyprus. There is an amazing amount of humanitarian aid that could be brought into the region. Right now, ships can carry 500 times more aid than trucks, but maritime corridor requires full ceasefire and imaginative ways to unload the ships. In short, what that simply means is Israel, as Tal said, had a blockade. Israel is willing to talk about getting rid of that blockade if they can be certain that the United Nations is going to get this massive amount of aid to Hamas, and that Hamas or some other Hamas surrogate or proxy is not going to attack the ship and basically steal everything that that is coming from the ship to Gaza directly. So this is one of those situations where the deal with Cyprus could be something that could be quickly um, implemented once negotiations between Israel, Cyprus, the United States, Qatar, and everyone who is working on these project can be done and can be assured that there's not going to be any pirating done to get this aid in. So there is a great deal of that going on. One more quick thing, and that has to do with the hostage negotiations. As we know, again, earlier this week, Hamas said that they would not begin negotiations, just mentioned it to you, without a ceasefire. Okay. That's a non starter for Israel. Israel wants to go back to the deal that was negotiated before, which was hostages for hostages, and a you know a pause in the fighting. We were assured by the high-ranking member of the Israeli government that they are still very willing and very much want to make a deal to get that hostage situation um, taken care of. So I think that is something that we could see down the line. I think if the United States were not confident that there could be some sort of deal, worked out in the, next week to 10 days, maybe shorter, hopefully, that they might be able to come to some sort of agreement where they go back into that. And I think that at the moment, the question remains, and this was mentioned yesterday in our briefing with the high-ranking government official from Israel, that part of it may be that Hamas, because not all of those hostages were taken by Hamas controlled folks. Some of them were taken by the proxies and the people who, in one way or another, support Hamas, but may not necessarily be in constant contact with them. And especially now that Israel has taken out so much of the communications between Hamas and their uh, team in the north and the team in the south. So there's some concern that there's not any communications between the north and south, and necessarily where exactly are all these 139 hostages being kept at this moment. So as that begins to unwind and Hamas can get a note on where these people are, then hopefully negotiations can restart on that one. Now, so what happens now with the UN resolution? I believe that they'll begin to work with the U.S., Qatar, and Egypt, um, obviously with Israel as well, to make certain that first and foremost, let's see if they can get the Cyprus port open so that they can make the shipments over there. Hopefully, they can put more people, which the United Nations has said they would, put more people on the aid corridors that are presently there, so that Israel can put forth more trucks going back and forth with humanitarian aid through the two border crossings that presently are open, and so that can be ratcheted up. But at the end of the day, the key here is to get the humanitarian food into and medicine and other supplies into Gaza as quickly as possible without having Hamas steal it. Also, obviously, pressure is being put on the government to get the hostages back and to do whatever it takes to get the hostages back, which includes ratcheting down the potential of the war movement that they're going through at this moment. So we're really paying attention to that. When is Israel going to transition into more targeted fighting and trying to take out the leaders of Hamas? Where are they, and will that is that something that's even achievable? You remember that it took almost almost a decade from 9/11 until the United States, took out Osama bin Laden. So it's this is a very difficult situation. I should say, in closing, that the person who's handling the negotiations from this, who's the head of the CIA, is a gentleman by the name of Bill Burns. Bill Burns is not a name that many people right off the top of their head know. So let me give you a little background on Bill. Why Bill Burns is so important to this negotiation, or why would the CIA director be involved? Well, first of all, the CIA is an international policing organization, so he's well versed in law, international law. He also served for 23 years in the diplomatic corps, and during that tour, he was the United States ambassador to Jordan. So he's very knowledgeable of the region and has very good contacts all within the region. So he's very respected, and he's very well connected in that regard. He served as an undersecretary of state to former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton. So he has the diplomatic skills along with the skills of a CIA, director, which means that he has knowledge of how terrorists work in the region, how the governments in the work in the region, where he needs to get that intel, how he needs to get it, from whom he needs to get it, along with, as we said before earlier in the week, that CENTCOM, which is the Central Command for the United States, who went through CENTCOM was in where they were in charge of the first Gulf War and pretty much everything that's happened in the Middle East that the United States has been involved with since 2001, and actually in some regards well before that, as I said before, all the way back to George Herbert Walker Bush. So CENTCOM has been there. CENTCOM, Lloyd Austin, the Secretary of Defense, who has been there this week. General Austin was in charge of CENTCOM. CENTCOM is on a daily basis involved with what's going on there. They're speaking with the Israeli government on a constant basis. So what Bill Burns brings is he brings his own expertise in the area, as well as much intel as he needs to be able to talk with resolution as to what can be done in getting a deal done in the Middle East. He is a very, very important cog in this. He was the person from the United States side who helped broker the original deal, which was lasted for a week, and did bring over 100 hostages out of Gaza. So at this point in time, I don't think that after speaking with the high-ranking member of the Israeli government, I think that they want a deal. There is a deal to be had. It basically boils down to how much does Hamas want that deal. I think that they do want a deal. So I do think that there's going to be a deal made. As I said before, is it going to be made, in the next few days, the next month. My hope is, and I think it will be done sooner as opposed to later. I think that we'll see the humanitarian aid begin to ramp up as quickly as they can possibly get it there. I also believe that even though right now that there's some heavy battles going on and things seem to be going the same way they've been going for a while, that there will be a transition to more targeted um, attention, which is basically going after those leaders and less after you know after situations where um, they bomb in hopes of taking out the tunnels and hopefully as many of the Hamas people uh, that they can. And I think that that's going to be a more targeted one. So right now, Israel is facing a very difficult diplomatic situation, and that is the United States, France, Great Britain, Canada, Australia, um, all the usual folks who support Israel at at key times from a diplomatic standpoint are coming under increasing pressure as the body count um, in in Gaza mounts to do something that gets the hostages back, but also that ratchets down the number of Palestinians who get killed. And I do believe that what the UN resolution uh, is a start, something that clearly the U.S. wasn't against, or they would have vetoed it. They think that it's time to transition to, as I said, the next phase of the war, which is targeting the key members of Hamas. So that's where we are today, which is Friday. And as we transition into the weekend, I think we all hope that what we see is a better opportunity to get some sort of deal that brings home the hostages and brings them home as quickly as possible. So I think that's where we are. A couple quick items of business. You could do us a great favor if you would, subscribe, hit the bell, because that gives you the opportunity to know when we're going live and know when the podcast is available. And so we look forward to you doing that. Absolutely, please leave a comment. We answer all comments, no matter what you say, whether you agree with us, disagree with us, questions you want us to ask. As I said, I attend the briefings here at the with Tal and Elon, with the Prime Minister. I also attend the briefings of Secretary of State Blinken, the White House, as well as General Austin, and any pertinent briefing that has to do with what's going on in Israel. So we keep you posted as best we can on a daily basis. We hope that you join us. If for some reason that you can't catch us on YouTube, that's okay, because you can reach us. The podcast is available approximately an hour after we tape this on Amazon, Apple, Spreaker, Stitcher, Spotify, iHeartRadio, TuneIn Radio, Audible, and wherever you get your podcasts. So you can subscribe to the podcast, and either way, you're going to get the information put in your box the moment that you sign up for it. Okay, so there you go, folks. Have a safe weekend, and we will see you back here on Monday. Okay, until then, take care.